Welcome back to the bench, and today we've got this Corvid 24 with a couple of broken sockets there. So let's see what we can do. Let's take off this front panel. And yeah, there's just 5 connections per socket, but there's just some SMD there, so I don't really want to use the hot air gun. So while I'm practicing on this first socket, we also have this Kona 4 card, which cannot be seen in the device list in either Mac nor PC. And when you put it in, there's a green light and a red light. So if there's anyone out there who can shed some light on why this might not be working, it'd be gratefully appreciated. Okay, the pins are really tight in these holes, so it's quite hard to get the solder completely out. Took me a couple of goes, and with no force at all now that comes out. So now I've done that once, let's do it again, and I won't speed it up now I've got the knack down. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to apply some flux onto the connectors. There's 5 of them, and this might sound a bit counterintuitive, but we are actually going to solder some extra fresh solder onto these pins. Now the idea behind that is that it will give us a good surface area where our solder sucker can make good contact with this fresh solder, and as you will see, that's a vital part of making this technique work, because you have to get that solder heated throughout the pad and the other side before you can even attempt to suck any solder out. So we've just added some more solder there. That gives us a nice bit of surface area, and now we're just going to add a bit more flux, and then we can finally go in with the solder sucker. So what I find is a good idea is you just gently rest the solder sucker on the pad. Now we don't want to push any pressure on the pad at all in case it comes off from the board, and I'm just moving the leg around to see if I can, and you'll see it will loosen up. And then you can use the sucker to suck out the solder. And we can go on to another pin now. Hold it on for a few seconds. Allow that heat to transfer through the board onto the other side. And when you can feel that leg wobbling, then you can use the sucker. And give it a few attempts. That's looking much better than my first go. And as you find, the actual whole board area will heat up as you go through each hole, which makes each hole a bit easier than the last. So we hold it down for a few seconds, and without any pressure on the pad, we're moving the leg. So imagine like 1/2 mil distance from the end of the tip to the PCB. And that's looking much cleaner than it did on my first go, which is great. And if you need to, just pop around again. Obviously this whole area of the board now is getting quite warm, so you don't need to have to hold the iron tip on quite as long, but this is looking good. And what we want is to just clear as much solder as possible to not give any resistance. So let's see how that went. And we don't want to use any force when we do this. If you have to use force, then it's stuck in there, you need to remove some more, but that came out great. Excellent. Okay, so now we just need to clean up the area. So I just used some braid there to get rid of any excess solder, and now we'll clean it up with some isopropyl hole and a cotton bud. So I'm just going to check with the microscope that we haven't disturbed any of the SMD components. That would have ruined your day if they'd have blown away off in the wind. So yeah, everything's looking great there. Nice and clean pads. So I've got some replacement parts from RS. They were the cheapest of the socket of this type, so we'll see if that makes any difference. screw out which holds the plate. And there we go. And it's always nice to come back to a job when after you've cleaned it and everything looks brand new. So we'll just get the new socket and hopefully it will fit. Look at that, the digital calipers weren't lying to me. There we go, now she's all back together. The reason for putting the sockets in first and putting the front panel back on is now that when we solder them, they're kind of locked in place at that exact angle, so that when you remove the front panel again, you'll have no trouble realigning everything up, because it's kind of hard set with the soldering now. And trying to use every last little bit of solder I've got. This thin solder is actually quite brittle, so you've got to be a bit careful you don't break it. It's much nicer if it comes straight off the roll. And there we go. That's all the connectors. So we're going to again just clean up with the isopropyl alcohol to remove any flux residue. This might take a few Q-tips and a couple of passes, but it's very satisfying when after you clean the board up like this. And it looks like no one's even touched it. I order these cutting buds by the thousand now. Just it's so annoying when you run out. I don't like to leave any flux residue on the board after a repair like this. And it's good to get everything off. Looking really good. Okay, so I guess we just put it back into a PC and see if it works. So jerry-rigged this install here. We've got the Corvid 24 in this Mac 5.1 running Windows, and we have an HDMI out from the laptop there coming to this converter, converting it into SDI, coming into the Corvid 24, and the output goes to another box HDMI out to the TV screen. And there we can see the normal TV screen, and we can switch to the output now, and that's one of the sockets that wasn't working. So everything's working great. Catch you next time.